Today in the gamers room, I thought I would go over some tips and tricks on how to use your Warlock tiles and talk about how I made this dungeon. So stay tuned.
So the first thing I want to point out is when you use these inside corners, you understand that they actually fit within the grid pattern. So that's a very useful thing to remember. And it allows you to do stuff like this, where if you want to, you can actually put a raised platform on top of it. Only issue with doing that is that the stairs are really meant to go to the height of the wall. When you put the thing on top, it's just a little bit higher, and then when you put the decorative trim on there, it sticks out a little bit farther. But it's just a nice little tip that if you ever want to have a raised platform within a room, you can use these inside walls to do that. So here is an example of one of the issues that a lot of people are having is when you use the inside corners to try to create like a loop or a switchback in a dungeon, you end up not being able to fit walls over here because you have a half an inch taken up by this wall and a half an inch taken up by this wall. That's where these guys really come in handy. What I've done here is I've made a hallway, and you can attach these to the wall and they fit in here. And the way you do this is that if you look at this, the wall is actually clipped in off center, which allows you to use these posts to make up the difference. So the way I built that dungeon is I started out just by making 5 rooms. I didn't put much thought into them other than I wanted something that could be used as an entrance that had multiple ins and outs. I made something that I wanted to be, long. And when I thought about it, I'm like, well, make sure I have something that exits to the left and something that exits to the right. That way I can make a kind of a loop. And then I was thinking, well, I want like a central room that had 4 ways in. Ignore this door. Originally, I didn't have it in there, and we'll talk about why it's there now later. And you can ignore this because that was added just because I need to use the pieces I had on hands when I started connecting these. Same thing, I don't think this door wasn't in my original room either. It was just these 3, and I added it later. And then lastly, I wanted a big throne room. So I made this room and I made a raised platform, and we'll talk more about this later. At the get in, I'll talk about how I did this. But for now, I just made these 5 rooms and then I went to connect them. So once I had my 5 rooms built, I just did a general layout of what I thought it could look like. I put obviously the throne room in the back, an entrance in the front, my 2 wings, and a central chamber, which is how I planned it from the start. And then I just started building hallways. So the start was the back, which I thought was pretty easy. I just made this guy right here, which then allowed this to be slotted in, which allowed this to be slotted here, and allowed that to be slotted there. Next was I decided I wanted to connect my front. So I built this room and I put it right there, and that's where you see I kind of had to remove some walls to add corner pieces so I could switch things around just because I was using what I had available to me. Next was I needed to connect this room to that room, so I built this hallway. And when I got to this point, I realized that, wow, I have an actual, grid space in here that I can fill in. So I put doors here, here, and here, where I originally had walls. Just simply took 3 tiles. I used the interior walls and dropped that in there. So now I got a couple of small rooms that can be searched. When you look up here, I saw that I had another space that I could use, and I had the tiles, so I was like, why not? I replaced the wall with a door, built this little guy so you can drop him in there. voila, that is how I built my dungeon. A lot of it was just no pre-planning at all, just making things work. Uh, Built my 5 rooms, built my hallways, and then wherever I could fit in another room, I went ahead and did that. So, in talking about my the way I do things, as you can see here, uh, this is obviously in a grid, and you got this wall here. When married up, you have a space. So I just added this one there, so it filled in that 1-inch space. Works pretty good. If you did not care so much about things being on grid, you could have always done something like that, but then this room and that room would not be on the same grid. I don't see any reason to worry about things being on the same grid when you go from one room to the other. I think it's not a big deal. So a lot of times, sometimes that would just fix a lot of your problems, is to just not worry about maintaining a grid through a wall space. But this is obviously how I did that. Here you can see the same thing. We have this normal wall that I built first. We've got these corner posts. When you slot them in, then this guy right here, has to be offset from there, which actually works out really well. And then when you get over here, well, I end up with the 1-inch gap. So I just use 2 corner posts to fill that in. The sad thing is I end up using up a lot of my corner posts to actually fill in wall segments, which ends up leaving a lot of gaps here and here, and that's just a matter of what I have on hand. Now that we're all done, everything is clicked together. So you can bring in your rooms as your party explores. You can say they've entered the main entrance and they decide they want to go to the left. You can then say, okay, here is your hallway. They come through and they say, oh, we tripped the trap right there. And you just have to tell them, well, there's a door here and a door here. And they decide they want to go through this door. Well, then you just populate this room. They come through and they take care of this encounter, and then they say, well, they want to go through this door. You say, okay, well, now you have your hallway. Hallways are great for traps or just small encounters. You don't have to have all the walls in. You just tell them that there's some doors here and a door here, and they decide they want to head down. And you just populate this guy. As they keep going, they say, well, I want to explore this area. And then you have to, you can't all be perfect. You drop this in, and they realize that, oh, there's a small room there, and there's obviously a space over here. But they keep moving through, and they say they want to explore that door, and they find the treasure room, and you drop that guy in. And they come back through, and they say they want to look through here, and then they populate this hallway. And then they can decide to come here. They know this will back around, and next they can decide they want to go up through here. So you populate that guy. And all these guys can be sitting off to the side. You can have your furniture, pre-laid in there. You might have it situated perfectly or just bundle it in and then quickly put it together as they go in. And then when they come back through, they're ready for the big guy. So you drop him in, bringing up the throne room. Now let's talk about my throne room. The way I did this was pretty simple. I started off with just a large room. Then I decided I wanted a raised platform, so I got to play around with that. The nice thing is I just hook these posts in the end, and it actually sets it to where the wall is on par or the same height as these walls. And then I just left that wall out so that it would insert in. One of the problems I had when I did this is that it wanted to sag like that. But what I found is putting these in tightened up the floor and kept it from sagging as much, which also added another step, which I thought was very lovely. Next thing is I wanted to close off this space here, and what I discovered is that the landings, when you take out the very first pier expansion, is the exact height for setting the wall on top, the floor on top to match the wall. So I just did that with the two. and sat them in there. It opens up a lot of possibilities because you can actually then use these instead of the posts to support uh, your structure. So I just take that out and slide it under there, and that would work as well. And then the stairs line up perfectly with the height of the raised platform, and you stay on grid. You don't have to worry about losing, the half an inch here because of the thickness of the wall, since you have this sitting above the wall. These obviously become unplayable areas, and what I ended up doing was just decorating them by putting some statues on them or suits of armor. And then I added some pillars and just really filled it out. I was really happy with the way that turned out. I thought that was a great way to do it, and a great way to implement multiple levels in your builds.
And lastly, here are a few more steel shots. Enjoy.